In the jungle of glass and steel in Manhattan, a young analyst discovers that the line between ambition and truth may be thinner than he imagines. Amidst memories, tough choices, and incalculable risks, he must decide how much he is willing to lose in order not to betray his own soul. The morning mist still lingered over the Hudson River when Daniel Carter emerged from the subway station in Manhattan. As on every morning for the past 3 months, his headphones played the smooth jazz of Thelonious Monk while he held a cup of instant coffee bought from the corner stand. The liquid was nothing compared to the Italian espressos his colleagues consumed, but it cost 1/3 of the price. The skyscraper of Grant and Wilcox Capital rose like a fortress of glass and steel against the autumn sky. Daniel adjusted his battered briefcase, a graduation gift from his mother, and took a deep breath. Inside it were reports meticulously analyzed during entire early mornings, most of which would probably never be read. Another day, he murmured to himself, recalling the mantra his mother repeated before every double shift at the hospital. Each day is a chance to make a difference. Margaret Carter had passed away 2 years earlier, a victim of cancer she had ignored for too long, too busy caring for others to take care of herself. A dedicated nurse at a public hospital in New Jersey, she had raised Daniel alone after his father abandoned them when he was only 5 years old. In the mirrored elevator, Daniel observed his reflection. Navy blue suit bought on sale, dark tie, carefully combed brown hair. He looked like the other analysts, but he knew he was different. While most interns came from influential families or elite universities, he was a scholarship student from a state college, the Jersey kid, as whispered in the hallways. "Good morning, Dan," greeted Sophia Miller as she saw him exit the elevator. At 28, Sophia was one of the few people on the 32nd floor who treated him as an equal. "Ready for tomorrow's meeting?" Daniel nodded, trying to appear confident. The meeting with the Investors Council was the most important event of the quarter, where the merger between Meridian Healthcare and Pharmatech Global, a deal valued in billions, would be presented. "I'm almost done reviewing the risk reports," he replied, placing his briefcase on the work table, a tiny cubicle compared to the director's spacious offices. Sophia approached, lowering her voice. "Richard seems obsessed with this merger. I've never seen him so intense." Richard Hamilton was the CEO, a 52-year-old man with the charisma of a politician and the calculated coldness of a poker player. His impeccable $3,000 suit and his Patek Philippe watch were as much a part of his personality as his rehearsed smile. "I've noticed," Daniel hesitated. "Actually, I've been noticing some inconsistencies." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Daniel opened a digital folder on his computer. "The growth projections after the merger seem overly optimistic, and there are regulatory risks that are being downplayed in the presentations." Sophia frowned, looking around nervously. "Have you mentioned this to anyone?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure before." The conversation was interrupted by the sudden buzz in the office. Richard Hamilton was walking down the central aisle, selectively greeting some employees. As he passed by Daniel's desk, he cast a quick glance at the scattered papers. "Carter, I need those summaries by the end of the day," he said, not really expecting a response. "Yes, sir. But," Daniel hesitated, "I found some points in the reports that I think we should review." Hamilton stopped, his smile freezing for an almost imperceptible moment. "My office, 15 minutes, he said before continuing on his way. Sophia gave Daniel a worried look. "Be careful, Dan. Hamilton doesn't like being contradicted." Daniel nodded, feeling a knot forming in his stomach. While organizing his notes, his eyes landed on the small photo frame on his desk, his mother smiling in front of the ocean during a rare break when they had spent a weekend at the beach. It was the last trip they took together. "The truth can be costly, Danny," she used to say, "but silence costs the soul." 15 minutes later, Daniel knocked on Hamilton's office door. The room was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, designer furniture, shelves displaying awards and photographs with celebrities and politicians. "Come in, Carter." Hamilton gestured to a chair in front of his imposing desk. "What have you discovered that's so important?" Daniel opened his briefcase and extracted several carefully marked documents. "Sir, I have analyzed the risk reports, and there are significant discrepancies between the projections presented to investors and the raw data. He placed a spreadsheet on the table. Meridian Healthcare has pending lawsuits for billing fraud that were not included in the risk assessment. And Pharmatech Global has patents expiring in the next 18 months, which could drastically reduce its market value. Hamilton maintained a neutral expression, examining the papers leisurely. Finally, he looked up. Impressive, Carter. You did a thorough job. Daniel felt a brief moment of relief, which quickly dissipated with the following words. However, you're overstepping your role. Your job is to compile data, not interpret it. Strategic decisions are up to the board. But so, if we proceed with these inflated projections, we are essentially deceiving investors. People could lose a lifetime of savings if... Hamilton raised his hand, interrupting him. Carter, you're smart, but naive. This is Wall Street, not an ethics seminar. The merger is going to happen because it needs to happen. His tone became more severe. Tomorrow, at the presentation, your role is simple. Operate the projector. No comments, no interventions. He stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. If you value your future in this field, you will learn to play by the rules. Understood. Daniel felt the weight of those words like a stone on his chest. Understood, sir. As he left the office, his legs felt like lead. In the hallway, Sophia awaited him with an inquisitive look. He just shook his head. That bad? She asked. Worse. He want me to stay silent while we present manipulated data. Sophia sighed. Welcome to the real world of Wall Street, Dan. That's why I have Xanax in the drawer. The afternoon dragged on like an eternity. Daniel tried to focus on other tasks, but his mind kept returning to the falsified reports. He remembered Mr. Gonzalez, the childhood neighbor who lost all his savings in a fraudulent investment scheme. The man, who dreamed of opening a small repair shop, ended up having to work as a janitor until he was 78 years old. At 7 in the evening, the office was almost empty. Daniel gathered his belongings, including the original reports he had copied onto his flash drive. On the subway back to Queens, he watched the tired faces around him, ordinary people who entrusted their dreams and savings to institutions like Grant and Wilcox. His small apartment felt even more lonely that night. It was a simple studio with a small kitchenette, a single bed, and a desk where he studied. On the wall, a photo mural. His mother, college friends, places he dreamed of visiting one day. On the desk, a carved wooden box held his most precious memories. Daniel opened it and took out a yellowed note. It was the last message his mother had left him before being hospitalized for the last time. Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. He approached the window. From afar, he could see the lights of Manhattan, bright as artificial constellations. How many corrupt decisions were made in those gleaming buildings? How many lives were affected by choices made in luxurious meeting rooms? Daniel closed his eyes and, for the first time in a long time, prayed. It wasn't a formal prayer, just a desperate plea for guidance. I know I don't talk to you much, God, but I need help now. What should I do? That night, he slept poorly, dreaming of endless spreadsheets and his mother's disappointed gaze. The morning of the presentation arrived relentlessly. Daniel put on his best suit, the only one besides the navy blue he owned, and a red tie that his mother had given him as a graduation gift. For important days, she had said. In the conference room, everything was meticulously organized. Polished mahogany table, Italian leather chairs, crystal-clear water pitchers with slices of lemon. The state-of-the-art projector was connected to the laptop where Daniel had loaded the official presentation, the version approved by Hamilton, with minimized risks and inflated projections. But in his pocket, the flash drive with the real data weighed like lead. The investors began to arrive, men and women with serious expressions and expensive briefcases, representing pension funds, credit cooperatives, and family investment groups. People managing the money of thousands of others. Richard Hamilton greeted them with his characteristic charm, while Sophia organized the folders of printed material. She gave Daniel a look of solidarity. Just press the buttons, and this will be over soon, she whispered. At 10 o'clock sharp, Hamilton took his position at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your presence on this historic morning." His voice was melodious and confident as he detailed the wonders of the proposed merger. Daniel, discreetly positioned by the computer, advanced the slides according to the script. Each colorful chart, each optimistic projection made his stomach tighten. As you can see on the next slide, Hamilton continued, "The synergies between Meridian and Pharmatech will create unprecedented value for the shareholders." Daniel advanced to the slide showing the growth projections, an almost vertical ascending line, completely disconnected from the reality he had discovered in the raw data. It was at that moment that something inside him broke, or perhaps finally fixed itself. While Hamilton elaborated on exceptional returns and minimal risks, Daniel felt his mother's presence there, as vivid as the people around him. "Silence costs the soul," whispered a voice in his consciousness. His hand trembled as it rose into the air. "Excuse me." His voice was firmer than he expected. The room froze. Hamilton stopped his speech, looking at Daniel with a mixture of surprise and fury. "Mr. Carter, we can discuss your questions after the presentation," he said with a tense smile. But Daniel had already stood up. "I believe the investors deserve to know the full facts before making any decisions." A heavy silence fell over the room. Hamilton took 2 steps in his direction, but Daniel had already connected his pen drive to the computer. "These are the real data about the proposed merger." On the screen, a new presentation appeared, the slides he had prepared during the early morning hours, showing the true risks and realistic projections. Meridian Healthcare is facing fraud lawsuits that could result in fines of up to $300 million. Pharmatech will lose exclusive patents on 3 major drugs in the next 18 months, which will reduce its revenue by approximately 42%. His voice, initially trembling, gained firmness with each sentence. On the investors' faces, surprise gave way to concern. "Gentlemen, these are confirmed pieces of information with appropriate sources and documentation, which were omitted from the official presentation." Hamilton tried to intervene. "What Mr. Carter is presenting are personal interpretations of preliminary data that. These are official documents, public records, and independent financial analyses." Daniel interrupted, opening a folder of evidence. "And I have printed copies for everyone." Sophia, after a moment of hesitation, began to distribute the folders that Daniel had secretly prepared. One of the older investors, a man with gray hair and thin-rimmed glasses, was leafing through the documents with a serious expression. "Mr. Hamilton, this is extremely concerning. Why were these informations concealed?" Another investor, a representative of a teacher's pension fund, added, "We are talking about workers' savings that were entrusted to us. If we had invested based solely on the initial presentation." The room turned into a murmur of concerned voices. Hamilton was trying to regain control, but it was too late. "Gentlemen, I suggest we continue this discussion after a complete reassessment of the data." Clearly, there was a misunderstanding regarding today's presentation. As the investors withdrew to an adjacent room, Hamilton approached Daniel, his eyes blazing with anger. "You just committed professional suicide, Carter, not only in this bank, but all over Wall Street." Daniel held his gaze. "Maybe, but I can't sleep soundly tonight." In the following hours, administrative chaos ensued at Grant & Wilcox. The board of directors was called for an emergency meeting, and an internal investigation was announced. Daniel was instructed to remain in the building while his system access was revoked. At the end of the day, he was summoned to a smaller meeting room where 3 board members awaited him. To his surprise, the gray-haired investor was also present. "Mr. Carter," began the chairwoman of the board, a woman with a stern expression, "your actions today were, to say the least, unorthodox." Daniel nodded, bracing himself for the worst. "However," she continued, "you avoided a potential disaster for this institution. The legal repercussions of approving this merger with deliberately distorted information would be catastrophic." The gray-haired investor leaned forward. "Young man, I represent a fund that manages the savings of thousands of families. Today, you protected these people, even at the risk of your career. What motivated you?" Daniel thought for a moment. "My mother was a nurse. She spent her life caring for people she barely knew because she believed doing the right thing mattered. She always said, truth may be costly, but silence costs the soul. I couldn't remain silent. The room remained silent for a few moments. Mr. Carter, the president finally said, Richard Hamilton has been temporarily removed while we conduct a thorough investigation, and we would like you to remain with the company, not as an intern anymore, but as part of the new ethical compliance team we are forming. 1 week later, Daniel was leaving the Grant and Wilcox building under Manhattan's starry sky. Sophia walked beside him, both carrying boxes with their desk belongings. I can't believe you turned down the offer, she commented. It's the opportunity many dream of. Daniel smiled. I found out that maybe Wall Street isn't my place. I'm going to accept that offer from the NGO that works with financial education for low-income communities. Sophia nodded, understanding. You will earn 1/3 of what you would earn here. But I will sleep better. They stopped at the corner, where their paths would separate. You inspired me, you know? Confessed Sophia. That's why I'm leaving too. I'm going to work in corporate social responsibility auditing. Daniel looked up at the night sky, where a few stars stubbornly shone despite the city lights. She would be proud of you, said Sophia, pointing to the photo of Margaret that Daniel carried in his box. I know, he replied, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. I know she is. As he walked to the subway, Daniel felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. In his pocket, the yellowed note from his mother. Tell the truth, even if your voice shakes. He had trembled, but he had spoken. And at that moment, under the artificial lights of Manhattan, he felt that he was not alone in his journey. There was something greater guiding his steps, something his mother had always believed in and that he was now beginning to understand. True wealth, after all, was not measured in dollars or power, but in the courage to do what is right, even when everyone around chooses the easier path.